Imagine a sprawling subterranean fortress, like a city built entirely underground, packed with advanced weaponry, and designed to be, totally invincible.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right?
Exactly. It sounds like fiction.
Yeah.
But what if I told you the safest, deepest bunker on the planet could theoretically be defeated by, I don't know, a team with a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters on the surface?
It's wild to think about.
Right. So today we are unpacking a really fascinating, highly strategic essay from March 30, 2026.
It is a dense one.
It really is. It's titled Barak Face, Iran's Underground Missile Cities, a Fragile Fortress in a Widening War. And it was published on the blog of Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Yeah.
So for our deep dive today, our mission is to look at this text that blends, military strategy, geopolitical analysis, and psychological warfare.
Because it argues that these so-called invincible bunkers are actually incredibly fragile.
They really are. But before we dive in, I need to be super clear with you, the listener.
Right, the ground rules.
Exactly. You should know this source covers some really highly charged political and military conflicts involving Iran, Israel, and the United States.
Very sensitive stuff.
Yeah. And we are here strictly as your guides to unpack the arguments presented in this text. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints or, taking any political sides.
Definitely not.
Our goal is simply to help you understand the strategic theory the author is laying out here.
And to set the stage, we really have to introduce the author's core premise right up front.
Which is?
Well, it's that the survival of these massive underground systems depends entirely on a regime that is increasingly isolated above ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the subterranean fortress is only as strong as the surface-level infrastructure that feeds it.
Okay, let's unpack this because the source argues that these underground missile cities are far more vulnerable than the regime's propaganda claims, right?
Exactly. The videos we see are, endless, brilliantly lit tunnels with massive missiles.
Yeah, it looks super impressive.
It does, but they don't generate their own power.
Wait, really? None of it?
Right. They rely entirely on surface-level electricity grids and external fuel supplies.
It's like being in a state-of-the-art submarine, but your air hose is connected to a rowboat on the surface.
That has a perfect analogy.
Like, you're safe from the storm below, but if someone tips the rowboat, you're just done.
You're completely done. And, it begs the question of why. Why would a military invest billions in subterranean structures only to leave their lifelines exposed like that?
Yeah, that seems like a massive oversight.
Well, it's thermodynamics, basically. Running server farms, maintaining climate control for volatile missile fuel.
Which has to be super specific, right?
Very specific. And just providing breathable air for thousands of troops. That takes an astronomical amount of energy.
So why not just build a generator underground?
Because massive combustion generators create massive amounts of exhaust.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you'd need industrial shafts pushing superheated air to the surface, which is a massive thermal signature for satellites.
Ah, so you're just broadcasting your location.
Exactly. Plus, storing millions of gallons of diesel next to ballistic missiles is, well, it's just a recipe for a catastrophe.
Yeah, I can see how that's a bad idea.
So they compromise. They plug into the national grid.
But then precision strikes can just simply sever those lifelines.
Right. You don't need a 30,000-pound bunker buster. You just hit the power substations and the ventilation intakes on the surface.
Yeah, if forces are trapped underground without power or fuel, the psychological impact alone.
It's terrifying.
The fortress quickly becomes a lightless prison. The ventilation spins down, the air gets stale, it gets hot.
And your consoles go totally dark. The morale would just collapse with minutes.
Wow. So this dependency on the surface is a major physical weakness, obviously. But the source points out an even more critical digital weakness that ties the whole system together, doesn't it?
It really does. What's fascinating here is that the facilities are linked through a single, centralized communication network.
Wait, why on earth would you link everything to a single network? Doesn't standard military doctrine scream for decentralization?
You would think so, yeah.
It feels like putting all your apocalyptic eggs in one digital basket.
It is tactically risky, for sure. But we have to look at the tension between strict regime control and tactical security.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in an authoritarian system, the greatest fear isn't always the enemy outside. Sometimes it's a coup from within.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, if you decentralize and give autonomous launch authority to a bunker commander, You empower them to act against the state.
So they have to centralize out of paranoia.
Exactly. Every firing solution, every status update has to go back to Tehran. But that means compromising just one node exposes every connected facility.
And it gets worse, right? Because the text mentions these terrifying advanced sensing technologies.
Yes, the Earth itself just no longer provides a hiding place.
How does it even work? How do you map a bunker under solid rock?
Well, they use synthetic aperture radar, or SAR,
SAR, okay.
and it measures ground deformation down to the millimeter. When you hollow out a mountain, the bedrock shifts imperceptibly.
Wait, satellites can detect that from space.
Yes, over time, they pick up the microscopic stress fractures, and then there are gravimetric sensors.
Gravimetric, like gravity.
Yeah, solid granite has a specific density and gravitational pull. An empty tunnel has less mass.
That is insane.
Right. The sensors detect that tiny drop in gravitational pull, add thermal imaging for the heat of the servers, and seismic monitoring for the trucks.
And you basically have a 3D map of the whole place without ever going inside.
Exactly. You know where the blast doors are, where the troops sleep, everything.
Which connects back to the author's ultimate conclusion for the troops inside.
Right. If the regime above collapses, the central command is gone, the power is cut.
The forces below have no realistic option but to surrender.
None at all. They are completely paralyzed and blind.
But if the technology to map and disable these bunkers exists, why is the popular consensus so skeptical that it can be done?
This raises an important question about how we think about strategy.
Yeah, the text notes a chorus of academic and media voices insisting that defeating these bunkers just cannot be done.
Right, and Bhagat argues this reveals more about the speakers than the actual situation.
I love this part. I want you, the listener, to think about your own industry for a second.
Yeah.
How often do you hear someone say, "That's impossible," when they really just mean, "I don't know how to do it yet"?
Exactly. They mistake their own inability to imagine how to do it for strategic impossibility.
It's the danger of complacency.
It is. Think of the Maginot Line in World War II. Everyone said it was impenetrable, so Germany just drove around it.
Right. The French mistook a lack of imagination for physical impossibility.
And when media and academic narratives artificially inflate a regime's perceived invincibility, they're basically doing the regime's propaganda work for them.
Yeah, they build a psychological shield that's way thicker than the bunker's concrete.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We have to separate a tough tactical puzzle from actual impossibility.
But, breaking the physical infrastructure is really only half the battle, according to the source.
Right.
The real end game relies on a completely different force. The civilian population.
This is where the essay shifts gears completely. Bhagat says a mass uprising could end the Islamic Republic faster than any military campaign.
So what does this all mean? The source presents this huge paradox. It says the uprising cannot ignite while bombs are falling.
Right.
But Israel will not stop bombing until it judges Iran's military infrastructure is sufficiently degraded.
It's an agonizing catch-22.
It's like telling someone they need to completely renovate their house to put out a fire, but they can't start the renovations until the fire department stops spraying high-pressure water through the windows.
That's exactly it. We have to unpack the psychological threshold of civilians under bombardment.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes. When bombs are falling, your focus narrows to immediate physical survival, finding food, water, shelter for your family.
You aren't organizing a political movement in the middle of an air raid?
No. The logistics of that, communicating, gathering in public, they become impossible. Bombing triggers a survival instinct, not a revolutionary one.
People just hunker down.
Exactly. And Israel has this degradation threshold, as the text calls it.
Right, a specific metric of how much infrastructure has to be destroyed.
And until they reach that, they won't stop the campaign.
So it's this tragic waiting game. Civilian action is totally paralyzed by these external military timelines.
And understanding why this degradation is taking so long means we have to look at the actual weapons being used.
And the sheer scale of the battlefield, right?
Absolutely. The text shatters this idea that it's just a local conflict.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Tehran is inflicting real damage using Chinese-supplied satellite intelligence and Russian hardware integrated into their drones and metals.
It's a massive globalization of the conflict.
The irony here is just wild. The regime wants to project total independence, but their teeth are actually Chinese and Russian tech.
Yeah, they're using military-grade satellite navigation like China's Beidou system.
Which means?
It means their drones are much harder to jam than if they just used commercial GPS. They have encrypted pinpoint accuracy now.
Wow, so you're not just fighting domestic engineering, you're fighting superpower technology.
Right, which drastically elevates the stakes. And you're doing this in a country that is absolutely huge,
Yeah, the text points out that Iran's geography, it's nearly half the size of the U.S.
which is a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, it gives them an enormous area to hide things. An attacker has to search a continent-sized haystack,
Right, that makes sense.
but it requires an equally enormous area for defenders to police and supply.
Oh, so the logistics for him are a nightmare.
Totally. Moving a convoy of heavy launchers across hundreds of miles of mountains while under surveillance. Almost impossible.
The geography isolates their own forces.
Exactly.
But this geographic vastness isn't the only leverage Iran holds. They also control a tiny strip of water that pretty much dictates the global economy.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Yes. I want you, the listener, to think about how much you paid for gas this morning. This source is reminding you that your wallet is directly tied to a geographic choke point halfway across the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the global energy markets are basically hostage to the threat of this strait closing.
And the regime knows this and exploits it.
Completely. They don't even need to physically block it hull to hull.
Wait, they don't?
No, they
Yeah.
just use smart mines or swarm boats or anti-ship missiles. They just have to sink one commercial supertanker.
And then what happens?
Maritime insurance premiums skyrocket. Shipping companies just refuse to go through.
Wow. So it's an economic weapon.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the text says negotiations are doomed in the near term because both sides have maximalist positions.
A maximalist position.
Yes.
Meaning neither side is willing to compromise at all.
Right. They demand 100% of their goals and offer zero overlap. Neither side has a reverse gear.
So fighting will inevitably intensify.
Yes.
And with diplomacy dead and the skies filled with foreign-backed drones, Western capitals are being forced to consider the most difficult military option of all.
Which is a ground war.
Yeah. Western capitals are discussing ground troops. The text argues that air power alone might just create a grinding, costly slog if the population doesn't rise up.
But U.S. political tolerance for casualties is incredibly low.
Right. There is a far higher political price for a human life than a lost drone.
A $50 million drone is a budget issue. An American casualty is a political crisis.
Exactly. So the source suggests a smarter way. Rapid, targeted insertions, standoff systems, and integrating special forces with local resistance networks.
It's an alternative to a massive invasion.
But I have to push back here. It feels incredibly risky. The text says ground forces would face the exact same satellite-guided missiles that are already proving effective. Are rapid insertions really a magic bullet, or just a rebrand of a ground war?
That's a very fair point. It's not a magic bullet, it's risk mitigation. You use hypersonic cruise missile standoff systems to suppress defenses just long enough for a small team to drop in, cut a fiber optic cable, and get out.
Okay, so it's a very specific surgical strike.
Yes. But the really deep tactical dive here is integrating special forces with local resistance networks.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It's incredibly dangerous work. It means putting operatives on the ground to covertly train and coordinate with dissident groups.
Trying to build an insurgency right under the regime's nose.
Exactly, which requires immense bravery from the locals. And it synthesizes this back to the core theme.
Which is?
That the technology, the SAR mapping, the standoff missiles, it doesn't matter as much as whether the Iranian people decide to reclaim their country.
The tech just creates the opening.
Right. It cracks the armor so the human element can act.
That is profound. And to truly understand the gravity and scope of this analysis, we really need to take a quick look at the mind of the author who put these pieces together.
Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Yes. His blog notes he was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in NYC.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But then the blog's sidebar reveals this absolute explosion of content from 2026. He has books covering wildly diverse topics.
Like what?
Things like agentic AI, Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance, marketing principles, plus AI, and even several novels.
That is quite a range.
You have to marvel at the scope here. We are reading a hyper-specific military analysis written by someone who is simultaneously writing about the spiritual blueprints of abundance and the future of artificial intelligence and education.
It frames the essay not just as military commentary, but as a piece of a massive interconnected worldview.
Exactly. How do you think his background informs this essay?
Well, someone writing about agentic AI naturally understands complex systems. They'd focus on the technological vulnerabilities like centralized networks and advanced sensors of these missile cities.
Right, he sees the data flow, not just the concrete.
Exactly. And his political volunteering background, that explains his focus on grassroots movements and the civilian uprising being the ultimate deciding factor.
He understands how people organize.
Yes. He's applying systems engineering and political momentum to a military problem.
It's brilliant. It really is. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive, but I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over.
It's a heavy one.
It is. The text leaves us with this haunting image. Forces trapped below ground, with no option but to surrender if the surface regime falls. But consider this. What happens to these subterranean fortresses after a collapse?
Oh, wow.
Right. Do these massive, multi-billion-dollar underground cities become toxic tombs? Do they become bizarre historical museums? Or do they become the shadowy headquarters for whatever faction rises from the ashes next?
That is a chilling thought.
The architecture of war often outlives the wars themselves.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.